answer to your question, inshallah. What I want to talk to you about is one of the last surahs of the Quran given to the Prophet ﷺ. So Muslims know that the Quran was revealed to the Prophet over a course of 23 years, from the age of 40 to the age of 63. And one of the last surahs that was given to him was Surah Al-Ma'idah. Surah Al-Ma'idah is the 5th surah in the order of the Quran. For the non-Muslims that might be sitting here, the Quran is made up of 114 surahs. I personally don't like to call them chapters because it gives the wrong impression. Chapters are progressive. So if you study something in chapter 1, you're not going to find it again in chapter 2. It's going to build on chapter 1, and so on and so forth. The Quran's surahs are unique. That's not their structure. You might find something discussed in chapter 3 again in chapter 10, or surah 10, or surah 23 again, but brought up in a very different way. So the literary style of the Quran and the organization of the Quran is not typical. You can't really compare it to any other book, which is why I personally tend to not use the word verse or the word chapter to describe the components of the Quran, because then it makes you want to compare it to other books. But even if anybody, even non-Muslims, when they study the Quran, they realize its structure is not like any other book. So you cannot apply other standards to it. It has its own unique standard. Anyway, so the reason I brought this up is of the 114 surahs that were given to the Prophet over a course of 23 years, the Quran was not being compiled in chronological order. What that means is the first surah given to him is not number 1, and the second that was given to him is not number 2, and the third is not number 3. That is not the order of the Quran. So the chronology is different, and the way the Quran comes together now is different. It's a really interesting study, the difference between those two things. But, chronologically speaking, of those 23 years, the last surah, or one of the last surahs given to him, was actually surah number 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah. And another surah that was given to him around the same time was Surah Al-Tawbah, surah number 9. So there's two surahs. Even for the Muslims, I'd like you to remember surah number 5 and surah number, what did I say? 9. Al-Ma'idah and Al-Tawbah. Now what I want to share with you is it looks like these two surahs are talking about completely opposite messages, completely contradictory to each other, absolutely going polar directions apart. And it has to be understood why that is happening. Someone could argue this happened because one was given earlier and the other one was given later, but that's not the case. They were both given at the end around the same time. And yet, they are saying two very, very different things. And the way to understand that is to unlock a very important teaching of the Quran that a lot of Muslims are not familiar with, and also generally the non-Muslim world is not familiar with. So I'm going to start with Surah number 9, and then I'm going to come to Surah number 5. Just quick comments about both of them. So the Quran talks about many prophets. In fact, most of the time, the Quran is not talking about Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Most of the time when there's a conversation about prophets, it's about other prophets. And among the other prophets, a lot of the time, it's talking about the prophets that are mentioned in the Bible. Not exclusively, but quite a bit. So Nuh, Ibrahim, Yusuf, Zechariah, Yaqub, Musa, Isa, etc. I could keep giving names. If I was to give you the biblical version of those names, it's Abraham, Jacob, Noah, Adam, Jesus, Mary, Moses, etc., etc. Huge parts of the Quran are dedicated to that. It's retelling the stories of what is already found in the Bible. The way the Muslims see that, the way we see that is, there's a lot of commonality between the Bible and the Quran. But what the Quran is actually doing is telling the story originally. In other words, the names are the same. Abraham, Ibrahim, same name. Adam, same name. Right? Noah, Noah, same name. But the story is incredibly, significantly different Yes, there's a flood in the Bible, and there's a flood in the Quran. There's a sacrifice in the Bible for Abraham, there's a sacrifice in the Quran. There's the parting of the water for Moses in the Bible, there's a parting of the water for Musa in the Quran. Sure, they're the same. But a lot of the details are incredibly important and extremely different. Extremely different. So we shouldn't assume they're taking the same story. In fact, even modern scholars now say the Quran has an original telling of the story. The way the Muslims see that is, we believe that the Quran is reclaiming the original story that was corrupted over time or changed over time in biblical history. So the names remained, but the story changed. I was, interestingly, some years ago, I was in Texas, and I was giving a small talk to an interfaith audience. They were pastors and rabbis and scholars of different religions that were sitting there, and I spoke for 10 minutes about Abraham, about Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the rabbis in particular, one rabbi in particular I remember, they have a very strong emotional connection to Abraham, it's a patriarch, it's their father figure. And I spoke for 10 minutes about Ibrahim alayhi salam from the Quran's point of view. And you wouldn't believe it, the rabbi sitting in the front row was completely bawling in tears. He was overwhelmed with tears as he was hearing about Ibrahim alayhi salam. And I spoke to him afterwards, and it's because after studying, Jewish tradition for 30, 40, 50 years, he says, I heard things today that I did not know about my father. And he connected with him to his heart. That's because that's actually what the Quran does. So one of the ayah that I wanted to share with you in this regard is وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ تَرَى أَعْيُنَهُمْ تَفِيضُ مِنَ الدَّمْعِ. When Christians and Jews came to meet with the Prophet he says, and when they heard what was sent down to the messenger, you will see their eyes run with tears, flood with tears. وَمِمَّنْ الدَّمْعِ مِمَّا عَرَفُوا مِنَ الْحَقِّ, from what they recognize out of the truth. يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا آمَنَّا فَكُنَّا مَعَ الشَّاهِدِينَ. They will declare, our Master, we have come to believe, write us in among those that are witness. Count us among the witnesses to the truth. So that is something, that's a phenomenon Allah described in the Quran at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and in my own lifetime, as I have spoken to different faith groups, I've seen that happen in real life multiple times. And it's one thing, it's interesting, in other religious, they call it proselytization. So you'll go to a community where people don't really know a lot about their religion, and you'll try to convert them to a different religion, because they don't know that much about their own religion. What the Quran does, it actually doesn't target the not so knowledgeable of the other religion. The Quran targeted the rabbis, the priests, the scholars. It went after the most knowledgeable. Isn't that interesting? So it's as if it wants that conversation. The Quran wants that discussion with the knowledgeable among them. And it's saying to them, bring your evidences, bring your proof, open your book, bring the Torah, read it. Let's discuss it. That's actually the invitation of the Quran. But let me come back to my point. Two surahs I said I'm going to compare that seems to be contradicted. What two surahs did I say? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about Tawbah first. 5 and 9. So I'm talking about 9 first. Every prophet that came in the Bible, every major prophet that came to a nation, and there seems to be a pattern. And the pattern is, the prophet comes, the people, most of them reject that prophet, and then God finally decides that these people will no longer listen, so you need to escape with a few people who believe, and the rest of them will be punished. So this is the story of Nouman Ali Khan, Lut alayhi salam. The prophets not even mentioned in the Bible, the Arab prophets like Salih alayhi salam, Shu'aib alayhi salam. This is even the story of Musa alayhi salam. He's escaping Egypt and the Pharaoh gets drowned, right? So this is a pattern in the prophets' history. Well, the final prophet according to us is who? Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And which nation rejected him? The Quraysh. Rejected him. And the Quran keeps telling the Quraysh, the same thing will happen to you that happened to the people of Ad and Thamud. Don't feel safe. What happened to the people of Nuh can happen to you. What happened to the people of Fir'aun can happen to you. You understand? So the Quran keeps giving them these examples because they are next. If they don't change their way, they are next. So what happens? Well, they tried to kill the Prophet, like the Pharaoh tried to kill Moses. And Musa escaped from the water. Like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam escaped from the desert. He went to Medina. The same thing happened again. Well, once that happens, what's supposed to happen to the Pharaoh? He's supposed to get destroyed. So now what's supposed to happen to the Quraysh? They're supposed to get destroyed. Because this is what Allah does with every nation that rejects their prophet. So the next people up, lined up for destruction, are the Quraysh. Well, finally, when Makkah is conquered, Allah revealed what should be the punishment of the Quraysh. What should be the punishment of the Quraysh? But not just the Quraysh. Allah mentioned the punishment for 3 groups of people. Active. You can say 2 or 3. I'll explain all. Either the people who oppose the Prophet directly, which is Quraysh, or the people who tried to hurt the Prophet's mission indirectly by working with the Quraysh. And those were some of the Jewish tribes in Medina. When Meccans came to attack from the front, the Jewish tribes, some of them made a deal with Mecca and said, hey, they're expecting you from the front, we'll open the back door. Just come in from the back and kill them all. So they were working with the Quraysh. So finally, now that Makkah is conquered, it is time to deliver God's punishment, the same way the punishment came to the people of Nuh and Musa and all the other biblical prophets. Now it's time for the people of Quraysh and those who conspired. You understand? Allah gave 2 sets of punishments. One set of punishment for the Quraysh, another punishment for the people of the Jews and the Christians who transpired against the Prophet. Who conspired against. So the punishment to the Quraysh was not a flood, and it wasn't an earthquake, and it wasn't fire from the sky. In fact, Allah said, قَاتِلُوهُمْ يُعَذِّبْهُمُ اللَّهُ بِأَيْدِيكُمْ. Fight them. Allah will punish them this time, not from the sky, and not from the earth. Allah will punish them with your hands. So the Prophet's disciples, his companions, his Sahaba, they become God's punishment on the Quraysh. But there's a difference. The difference is, he wasn't told, go and kill everyone. Get your companions to kill all of them because they deserve to be executed. What was given to him in Surah Al-Tawbah, Surah number what? Surah number what? 9. Surah number 9 is also called the Surah of Punishment. It's also called what? The Surah of Punishment. It's the only surah of the Quran that does not begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There's a reason for that. Because this surah is to fulfill the sunnah of Allah. Allah does this with every nation who rejects the Prophet. And the one surah that came to target the Quraysh for what they did, that's Surah Al-Tawbah. That's Surah number 9. And of course it makes sense it came all the way at the end. Because the punishment is going to happen all the way at the end. And what are they told? They're told, now that you are about to be killed. So I want to compare this with Noah. What was the punishment in the nation of Noah? What was the punishment? You guys know? It was the flood. Now imagine the flood keeps rising, the water keeps rising until it reaches the mouth. And then it stops. And then the messenger says, okay, are you ready to listen now? I'm going to give you 4 months to swim around. And if you change your mind, the water will go back down. Did that happen? No. Once it comes, it doesn't stop. And then, like there's no stopping the punishment that comes from Allah. And then when it comes all of a sudden, without warning. It doesn't give them a schedule. But our Prophet, the final messenger, there were going to be no other messengers. So what Allah did this time is He did something He's never done before with any other nation. He gave them a new lease that He never gave any other nation. The swords reached here on the neck. their heads are hanging down. And then Allah said, فَسِيحُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ. Go ahead, you are free to move around in the region for 4 months. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّكُمْ غَيْرُ مُعْجِزِ اللَّهِ. And you should know you're no longer going to overpower God in any way. You're not going to overpower this mission. You are worthy of punishment because you have tried to kill God's messenger. You've tried to kill the believers. You've committed multiple crimes against Allah. You are worthy of execution, but you are given how much time? 4 months. 4 months. And once those 4 months are over, then the Muslims were told of the time, wherever you find them, kill them. Kill them wherever you find them. This is in what surah? Surah number 9, Surah Al-Tawbah. That was the punishment for the Quraysh. This is the fulfillment of Allah's legacy of punishments for nations that reject the messenger. You understand so far? Okay. But I mentioned there were 2 groups. There was the Quraysh, and there was who else? There was the Jewish tribes that conspired. They didn't come on the battlefield directly except on a few occasions, but most of the time they worked behind the scenes. And Allah gave them a different punishment. He said they must pay a penalty. They will not be given the death penalty, but they must pay a jizya, a penalty, and they must remain subjugated. They will be kept as if they are hostages, house arrest, and that's how. And they will be humiliated. They have to be kept humiliated because they tried to humiliate Allah's messenger. There's a principle in Arabic, in our religion, you find it over and over in the Quran, the application of that principle. Allah says, Al-jaza'u min jinsil amal. The punishment fits the crime. They try to humiliate the messenger. They try to create scandals against the messenger. They try to humiliate the believers. And Allah says now, they must pay and they must live humiliated. All of this is in what surah? Number 9. Now let's come to Surah Al-Ma'idah. Surah Al-Ma'idah revealed around the same time, towards the end of the seerah of the Prophet. Okay. What does Surah Al-Ma'idah say? Surah Al-Ma'idah is saying, eat among the people of the book. If their food is halal for you, your food is halal for them. You can also marry good women among their also, good women among the people of the book, you may marry among them. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. Cooperate with each other in good things. How do you cooperate with someone you're supposed to humiliate? How do you eat with someone and they eat with you and you marry among them when you're supposed to be humiliated? Hold on. Because when you marry someone, are you honoring the family or no? Isn't it not? It's the violation of the Hum. It's a violation of the Hum. And then here in Surah Al-Tawbah, Allah is saying, kill them wherever you find them and all of this. And they should live humiliated. And in Surah Al-Ma'idah, He's saying, cooperate with them, live among them. There can even be marriages among them. All this stuff is, and their food is okay for you, your food is okay for them. It was good enough to say, we may eat their food. But He says, no, they may eat your food. What does that mean? They may eat your food. Why does the Quran care about what they eat? It's because you're supposed to invite them over. That's when they're going to eat your food, when you invite them over. So the idea was socialize with them, interact with them, develop good relations with them. That is the policy of Surah Al-Ma'idah. So now we get 2 different policies. We get the Surah Al-Tawbah policy, and we get the Surah Al-Ma'idah policy. You following me so far? There's only one difference. The policy in Surah Al-Tawbah was for the time of the Prophet, because the punishment of Allah comes at the end of the legacy of a Prophet. And that's it. The policy of Surah Al-Ma'idah is forever onwards. Forever onwards. This is the policy. That's the difference between them. Now, what's amazing about Surah Al-Tawbah, the Surah of Punishment, I love that Surah. People are afraid of that Surah. They're like, people like, non-Muslims, they love quoting that Surah. That's when you kill them wherever you find them. This is what your book says. So, now that you found me, what are you going to do? That surah did not begin with what? For the Muslims, conflict is so incredible. We believe Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. That's what we believe Allah is. The most loving, caring, merciful. That's what we believe about Allah. Okay. And He gives messengers as a mercy. And then He gave the people Nuh as a mercy. And when they reject that mercy for 950 years, then one day Allah shuts the doors of His mercy. No more mercy for you. No more mercy for you. But does He shut the doors of mercy forever or just that day? For that day, just that day. And then the doors of Rahmah open again. In the Quran, every surah begins with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And there's one surah that doesn't have, in the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most loving, caring, merciful. Which surah? At-Tawbah, to remind the Muslim that that was the last time in the history of humanity that the door of Rahmah was closed. And from then on, it will never be closed again. You understand? So actually, we are reminded of what, and by the way, this is a special rahmah given to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because every other prophet, another prophet would come and punishment would come again. And another prophet would come and punishment would come again. But the final messenger was given this mercy that this is the last time the doors are being closed for these people only, and from then on, the foreign policy, different surah, that's Surah Al-Ma'idah. It's incredible. And you'll note that at the end of Surah Al-Tawbah, Allah says, بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. It describes the messenger of Allah, and it says that when it comes to believers, the messenger ﷺ is empathetic, compassionate, and he's full of mercy, love, and care. So the surah that did not even begin with Bismillah ends with the mercy given to the Prophet ﷺ. So I wanted to make these brief comments to you because as Muslims, you get questions about the Quran all the time. You get questions about what your book says. But the issue that I have, that I personally feel is critical, is we haven't done enough homework on our own book. We haven't done our study of our own book. And we can no longer afford to say, well, the book is important for scholars to study. We don't have to study. We just need to know one ayah here, one ayah there. It's good enough for us. We have to become students of the Lord. Because actually, we were responsible for clarifying the book of Allah to humanity. That was our collective responsibility. One man carried that responsibility, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then, at the end of his mission, he took that one load that he was carrying on his shoulders alone, and he made us share that load all together. So now we collectively share that load, which is something amazing about the Prophet. What one man was carrying, now it feels like it's too heavy for millions of people to carry together. But he was carrying it alone, right? But the good news is, it's a shared responsibility. So now everybody has to become a scholar or an expert or a researcher. But we can cooperate. We can work with each other. We can learn from each other. We can support efforts that are going on to educate. You understand? So you can all take different roles in helping spread and understand a proper understanding of the word of Allah. And so the last thing I'll share with you is a strong disagreement I have with Muslims who ignore Surah Al-Ma'idah and they assume that Surah Al-Tawbah is the foreign policy of Islam. So when they talk about Islam, they say, well, Islam, if you really want to know, is all in where? Surah Al-Tawbah. And when you say, what about Surah Al-Ma'idah? They're like, no, Surah Al-Tawbah. So what did they do? They reverse engineered the whole thing, where one surah was about no more rahmah. For people who don't deserve rahmah anymore. It was for them. And then we took that and unfortunately assumed this is for all of humanity. But that's just not the case. That's simply not the case. So for example, when Surah Al-Tawbah is talking about the mushrikeen and what they deserve in this life, it's definitely not talking about Buddhists or Hindus, or because they haven't committed any crimes against Allah's messenger. You understand? And this would be a really bad misunderstanding of the Quran. So our first job is to actually understand the Quran better ourselves, because we owe that. And sometimes you guys, because you're living here, you you never thought about learning Islam until somebody started asking you weird questions, and then you're like, I better learn some stuff, because I don't know any of these answers. So now the only motivation you have is to give somebody else answers. But you know what? The real motivation should be, Allah is speaking to you and me directly, I should have answers for myself first. Before somebody else motivates me to learn Allah's book, why doesn't my heart motivate itself to learn Allah's book? So those are my brief opening comments, inshallah. I'd love to take your questions. Thank you for the help.
OK， 在最后部分是他说，今天很多穆斯林他们在这个国家，在这个国家，然后其实遇到了很多非穆斯林，这个中国穆斯林不知道的中国国家，他们开始去学习伟大的哲理。但是虽然说真正的原因，你要去学习的东西，你现在需要你自己学习的东西，不是为了给其他人答案，但是古兰经是针对你们，给我们直接，古兰经是跟我们直接沟通。我们现在需要先学习的，我们现在需要先跟古兰经有关系，然后这样子真正的原因为什么你要学习？所以我觉得这个是很重要的部分。小包因为我们没办法要翻译直接翻译所有的演讲内容，但是小包我们这边有一些视频，然后专业的，然后小包那个中文的然后小包会放在一起，然后一小今天的有些东西不是完全你的英语的。
What is Iman? What do we need to learn it? Do we need to learn it? Which way can we learn it? Okay. So, what is Iman? The Prophet was told, you had no idea what the book was, what Iman was. So, how did Allah teach His messenger of faith? He taught him what to believe through revelation. He revealed to him what he should believe about God, about the afterlife, about the purpose of humanity, about how human beings ended up on this earth, the story of Adam alayhi salam. All of those things that we believe about what happened a long time before we were born, and what is going to happen after, and the purpose of all of it, that is our Iman. That's fundamentally our Iman. And there's no, the source of that is not some complicated thing. It's actually fairly straightforward. The way this faith spread all over the world is through the Quran. That's how it spread. And what worked in the beginning still works now. So you can find people that go to the library and just open up a copy of the Quran and just say, wow, that makes sense. And they end up becoming Muslim. Because they find Iman from the word of Allah. Even with a bad translation sometimes. But they find it. So don't think of it as something complicated. One thing I will tell you about Iman though, separate two things from each other. What is it that we believe? And how we believe. So the what and the how, those are two different things. So for example, what I believe as a Muslim is that I believe in Allah, I believe in His Messenger, I believe in all of the previous messengers, I believe in the angels, I believe in the day of judgment, I believe in heaven and hell, I believe in Allah's predestination and predetermination. I believe in so many things. However, how I believe is when I'm walking down the street and somebody offers me to, they're talking about a friend of mine, and they're saying something bad about him. At that time, my Iman should stop me from that conversation. Right? Because this Iman tells me that speaking about someone who's not there, which is riba, is something that will hurt my faith and is a violation against someone else. So I can theologically believe in one God and the book and the angels and all of that. That's the what. But the how is, how do I live that every day? What choices do I make because of it? What temptations do I stop myself from because of it? You know? What opportunities do I give up because of it? And how do I redirect my life because of it? That's the how of Iman. That's really what the Quran is emphasizing. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you want to? Okay. Yeah.
So we asked me a question about the sisters, no question. So the sister asks, why are we so intolerant, and why have we become so intolerant with the Muslims in general? With Muslims in general. Why are we so intolerant?
So many of these questions go back to the same answer, our distance from the Quran. The Quran calls us the religion of Ibrahim, yes? Millat Ibrahim. Ibrahim a.s. was concerned for one nation, one ethnicity, one group. He had this overwhelming love and concern for all humanity. Even as he was building the Kaaba, he said, get people's hearts to be inclined towards this. When the angels came to destroy the people of Lut, they stopped over at the house of Ibrahim a.s. And when he finds out that they're going to kill everybody in the nation of Lut, Lot's people, he argues against that. He debates against it because he doesn't want them killed. He wants them to be saved. He's concerned about other people. He doesn't condemn other people. He wants them to find guidance. This is our religion. Our religion is one of concern for your fellow human being. It's actually, you're the best ummah brought out for the service of people. So how did we forget that? We forgot that because we forgot the Quran. There's no way you can be a student and a serious learner of the Quran and have that kind of attitude towards other people. There's no way you can have both of those things. In fact, I'll give you another example of tolerance. You know, when the Muslims moved to Medina, the people of Makkah made war against the Muslims at Badr, then at Uhud, then at Ahzab, and almost killed the Prophet at Hudaybiyah. So there are 4 major incidents. And in between there are lots of other military expeditions and other kinds of things, and assassination attempts and all of that. So basically for that entire time, between Makkah and Medina there's a war. And eventually the Muslims of Medina have invaded Makkah, yes? Now that, and they're about to, if they hadn't been invaded Makkah at Hudaybiyah, you know what Allah says? There may be people in there that believe that you never knew believed. And there may be people who are in there, لِيُدْخِلَ اللَّهُ فِي رَحْمَتِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. There may be people in there that Allah will enter into His rahmah because He wants. In other words, even the people you went to war with 4 times, 3 times, and then almost the 4th time, even those people, there's no way for you to judge all of them. No way. This is what the Muslims were taught. So we should not have stereotypical attitudes, all Buddhists are the same, all Christians are the same, all Jews are the same, all this one is the same, all that one is, there's no such thing. That is a very anti-Quran kind of idea. And I think, inshallah, the more we educate ourselves in Allah's book, the more this intolerance will disappear. Your turn. I'll be faster than the next.
Okay, question here. Why these words? Why these are allowed to declare the man inside most traditional music for men also for himself, where they come? And another one is also making us do respect their personal expressions at each other, especially for Muslims who are in the head. Seeing many Muslims who are in the head, whether kings, men,
So, the house of Allah is a place that should be respected, but the house of Allah is also a place that is open to all of humanity. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, anybody could walk into the masjid. I was telling you even in the khutbah, I think, somebody even walked in and peed inside the masjid. There were Christians who worshipped Jesus that came to visit the Prophet, and there were no hotels at the time. So guess where they stayed? They stayed in the masjid. And these were priests, so every day they worshipped, and they worshipped Jesus. And guess where they worshipped Jesus? Inside the Masjid al-Nabawi. They did that for the entire time that was. This is the sunnah of the Surah Al-Imran. The masjid is a place where people come to find answers. The masjid does not have, the Muslims should observe certain kind of adab before they come into the masjid because they're Muslim. But a non-Muslim doesn't know anything yet. Or a new Muslim doesn't know yet. Or someone who was born in a Muslim family but never learned about Islam doesn't know yet. It's not their fault for walking in. I'll tell you a story. There was a man I knew in America who became Muslim. And he gave da'wah to his wife, and after 2 years, she also became Muslim. And the day she became Muslim, she came into the masjid. It was a Jummah. And she didn't have any hijab practice. So she did one of those situations. I don't know what to call it. It was a situation. Okay? And she goes to the women's section. And somebody looks at her and says, "You don't know how to wear hijab?" And she starts yelling at her in Arabic. And she says, "I'm sorry, I don't speak Arabic." She said, "What kind of Muslim are you? You don't speak Arabic." And she never came back to the masjid again. The person never came back to the masjid again. There was an old story. This happened in California. There was a man who used to work in a store. He owned a business, and his employee, his cashier, was a Vietnamese fellow. Okay, and he had his own religion. And every Friday, the owner would go to Jumu'ah prayer, and he said, "I want to go worship with you one day." So he said, "Come." So he took him into the masjid. So when he came into the masjid, he says, "Where's the statue?" Because this is a big hall, but there's no statue in the front. He says, Where's the God? And he said, "Our God has you cannot put a shape on him. Nothing is like him, And he said, "Oh." And then he just did this. And somebody got so angry inside the masjid, they grabbed him and pushed him out. "What are you doing? Astaghfirullah. Actually, what should happen is allow him to do what he's doing, and with Adam take him to the side, explain to him how we worship Allah, and replace this with love. This is what the masjid is supposed to be. Now, let's take a reality check also before we go to the ahkam. The reality check is that there are places in the world where people's father used to be Muslim, grandfather used to be Muslim, and 2 generations later, you say, "I think I know what Islam is," but they don't really know. A woman doesn't really know what her grandfather used to believe, but she's heard about it. And one day she's having trouble in her life. So she decides that she needs to turn to God. And her grandmother, she remembers used to talk about Allah a lot. So she looks up Allah Center. And she finds what? The masjid. And she walks into a masjid, and people start saying, "Astaghfirullah al-azim, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, min sharri ma khalaq, min sharri ma khalaq." You have no problem when she walks into your store and buys things. You have no problem when she walks into your restaurant and gives you money. You say, "Have a nice day." Or you have a real problem when she walks into the masjid, like, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." Kufr, Haram. Dajjal has walked into the masjid. What is wrong with you? Where did this come from? This is like as if women come inside the masjid, there will be terrible fitna. No, human beings come into the masjid to learn about Allah's deen. To learn about Allah's deen. And they should be treated with respect and kindness. That's not to say that the masjid should be turned into a marketplace, but it's also not to say that the masjid should be turned into a museum. That should not happen. So, no, there's nothing wrong with women being in the masjid. In fact, in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, in Islamic history, sometimes hadith used to be taught by women. In 5th century, 6th century, women used to teach hadith from around the minbar of the Prophet ﷺ. 400, 500 ulama used to be sitting there, scholars used to be sitting there learning hadith, both men and women, men's section and women's section, and the teacher is a female. This happened in our history. The problem is we don't even know our own history. We don't study our own history. We know one little line from here, one little snippet from here, and we think we understand the whole thing. I want you to open up your view of history, become a student of history. It's like this. If you look inside the door from the keyhole, how much do you see? Or if you look through a straw, how much can you see? This is how much you see when you find one narration. You see, but you see very little. You've got to see the entire picture. When you see the entire picture, you find this deen has a lot of room and has a lot of honors, both men and women. And that should be the case. That should absolutely be the case, and there's nothing wrong with people coming into Allah's house to learn. Of course, the rules of tahara and adab, we all know those things. Somebody asked a question about hijab, and somebody's wearing the hijab and they're also wearing jeans at the same time. Is that okay? And all of that. The bottom line is there's two things. There's what does Allah say, and what people are doing. And what people are doing is they're struggling. So some girl that's wearing jeans and a t-shirt, one day she decides to wear a hijab. That's a huge step for her. That was not easy for her. Nobody in her family wears it. Well, her friends are going to make fun of her. Now she's not good enough for anyone in her family, but on the other side, she's not also good enough for the Muslims. They're like, you think that's enough? This is a joke. This is not real Islam. Islam is not a negotiation. All or nothing. You want all or nothing. You understand? So what we do is, we don't let somebody even take one step because we accept the first step should be perfect. This is what we want. The first step should be perfect. Here's my problem with that. The Sahaba, they were willing to die for Islam. Yes or no? They were willing to leave their home for Islam. Yes or no? They left their family for Islam. Yes or no? And even then, Allah decided they're not ready to leave alcohol so easily. So He gave them one ayah, and He waited a few years, and He gave them another other substitute. Okay, because not only were you distracted, I was distracted. So anyway, Allah said first to them, first He said, the harm, the evil in alcohol is more than the benefit. But He didn't say it's forbidden. And later on He said, don't go near the prayer if you're drunk. Then finally, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah number 5, which is given when? All the way at the end. Then He said, it is an abomination, it's an evil from the work of the devil. Allah could have said that in Surah He could have said that after Surah Al-Ikhlas. He could have given that to them in Surah Al-An'am, Surah Al-A'raf. So 60%, more than 60% of the Quran was given to the Prophet in Makkah. He didn't say anything about alcohol. Why? Because Allah knows they were not ready. It's not easy. It's not easy. Even though other things were easy. When it came to the hijab, Allah could have, it's just a piece of cloth, a small piece of cotton or fabric. It's not that big, it's not that heavy. It's not going to break your neck. 60% of the Quran came down, Allah didn't say anything about hijab. When hijrah happened, no woman knew about the command of hijab. When Badr happened, no woman knew about the command of hijab. When Uhud happened, no woman knew about the command of hijab. Then Allah revealed in Surah Al-Ahzab and Surah Al-Nur, He revealed the clothing of women. How they should dress. The question is, why did it take so long? All this time? Because you know what? It seems for men, alcohol was going to be a difficult one. And it also seems for women, what was going to be a difficult one? Changing how they dress was going to be a tough one. So Allah didn't give it right away. He took his time. The Quran is not a book of rules only. It is a book of transformation. When someone comes closer to Allah, they are going through a transformation. The final thing I'll give you to help you understand this is Allah at the end in Surah Al-Fatih. Allah described what the Prophet did for the Sahaba. He described, to understand what the Prophet did for the Sahaba, he uses the example of a farmer who's growing a crop. So it's like the Prophet is the farmer, and you and I are the crop. The Sahaba are the crop. Now the crop, you don't put the seed in the ground, put the water and say, where's the tree? How come I can't? Where's the corn? I've been waiting 45 minutes, all or nothing. No, when you put the seed in, you have to put the water in, you have to let the light come, you have to remove the bugs, you have to clean the soil, put water again, clean, put water again, then it grows little by little, by little, by little, by little. There's a maturity process, isn't it? That's the same thing that happens in the life of a believer. They have to go through a maturity. They have to go through a tarbiyah, and that happens through the tarbiyah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So yes, it is not appropriate in the law of Allah to not wear the jilbab or the khimar. Those are the two things that Allah revealed, and the technicalities of them, inshallah, one day I'll describe to you guys. I've given a 4-hour lecture on the khimar, by the way, those of you that are interested. Just the head cover. I did a 4-hour just explanation of what that means, and what the word comes from, what the ayah means, and how we should understand it. But more important than that is allow people to take steps. But they should be clear that what they're doing is not there yet. If there's 20%, they should be clear it's 20%. And they shouldn't lie to themselves and say, no, this 20% is my 100%. That's the best I can do, Allah knows. No, you don't tell Allah your religion. Allah tells you your religion. You want to teach Allah your deen? No, this is my truth. This is my interpretation. This is my understanding. This is my personal relationship with Allah. Yeah. You don't get to make it up. You can say I'm a work in progress. I know I'm not there yet. I'm working on it. Here's the progress I'm making. Here are my obstacles. Fine. But you don't get to change the religion and say, since I can't do it, therefore this is the best I can do, therefore Allah will bend the religion to my will. I mean, we came to submit to Allah, not to submit Allah's religion to us. You know?
So I have two questions here about marriage.
Oh no.
One is about getting married in Muslim. So there's one sister who's not Muslim getting married in Muslim. And another sister, she is Muslim and the guy is not. So we know the sister was not Muslim. I'm getting married in a Muslim and I'm struggling to become a Muslim because I don't want to put pressure on myself. I want Allah to be proud of me, but I don't know how I can do it. And I'm afraid I'll do it and it's going to be my Muslim family. So the second one, how do you face if someone wants to convert to Islam because he wants to marry a Muslim woman?
Okay.
And we're talking about Islam, they don't want to have that pressure. So how do we deal with that situation?
Okay. So, for the sister who's not a Muslim yet, and she's marrying a Muslim man, there may be a lot of pressure from his mother and father. Make sure she converts, make sure she converts, make sure she converts. And the thing is that human beings were not designed to be controlled by other human beings. We willingly give our control to Allah. But we have a problem taking control from other human beings. So my advice to the guy's family, the man's family, is stop making Islam hard for her by pushing her. Because now she's confused whether she's doing this for Allah or for you two, for your family. And you're messing up her intentions. She should do nothing, her Islam should have nothing to do with you or your family. Because on Judgment Day, all that will matter is that she did that for Allah, and not because of anything else. Now let me talk to the sister herself. I think what you should learn to do is to separate what people say and what people think and whether or not people will be happy or upset, all of that should become irrelevant. Because let me tell you what Shaitan comes to you and says. I know Shaitan pretty well, so I'll tell you. Shaitan comes to you and says, if you become Muslim, his parents will be so happy, and they'll think you became Muslim because of them. I don't want them to feel good that they won. So I'm not accepting Islam and giving them these 5 points, or these 500 points, because I didn't become Muslim for them. I did it for me. So I want to make sure that they don't have the satisfaction of my Islam. Because I'm not doing it for them. See, now what's happening is, if they will be happy, or they will take credit, or they will say, it's because of us she became Muslim and all of that. Your thoughts are about how they will feel, how they will be happy, how they will be proud, how they will take credit. They. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with Allah. You have replaced the concern for Allah and yourself with your thoughts about how other people will perceive this, and how other people will see this as their victory. Whether they think it's them, whether they say she became Muslim because of us, or they don't say anything, should be irrelevant. Shouldn't matter to you at all. That's when you understand Islam. When people's comments and their criticism and their praise and their false credit doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. You don't feel the need to correct it. By the way, I became Muslim for myself, not for you, okay? You feel no need to correct. Because you're not feeling like something was taken away from you. Nothing was taken away. I'll give you a silly example of this. My youth was in Saudi. I was in Saudi when I was in 2nd grade until 8th grade. And then in my teenage years, I was in New York. And a long time after I got married, I moved to Texas, in Dallas. So Riyadh, New York, Dallas, yeah? And I went to Houston, a completely different city. First time I went to Houston, I went to this big masjid, I gave a khutbah, an elderly man came up to me and said, MashaAllah, you have grown up so much. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I remember when you used to run around over here and I used to teach you. And now look at you giving the khutbah. I tell everyone, MashaAllah, I taught him. Oh. And so I said, thank you so much. I gave him a hug. You know, it doesn't take anything away from him. What do you do with someone else? Or it's a fun story for him. I don't know. It was a psychological experiment. But it shouldn't take anything away from me. I don't need to correct him and say, excuse me, this is my first time in Houston. I don't know you. Don't tell anyone you taught me. It's okay. Take credit. It's all good. It's fine. You need to stop thinking about others. Just think about why or why not you should be thinking about something. Now, on the other side, this is going to be controversial, but I think it's important for you to hear. Even among the Sahaba, there's a man who comes to a woman and says, I want to marry you, and she says, no, you're not Muslim. He says, fine, I'll become Muslim. And he became Muslim. And then they got married. Uh-oh. But that was like, hey, but he only became Muslim for what? To be with the girl. To halify the relationship. That's the only reason. He was not genuinely interested in Islam. The beautiful thing about our religion is we don't have the right to judge the intentions of anyone, even if you and I think it is obvious. Even if you think it's obvious. You have no right to judge why someone accepted Islam. I know people that accepted Islam because they fell in love with a Muslim sister and all of that, and they took Shahada and they convinced the family and only did it for the girl. And now he knows more Islam than her. Because we don't know how Allah changes the hearts. We don't know. Hamza radiallahu anhu, you know the famous story of Hamza and how he became Muslim. He found out that Abu Lahab had hurt the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He comes to Abu Lahab and said, what did you do? Did you hit my nephew? Yeah. He punched him and said, okay, I'm Muslim too now. Now what? Did he become Muslim because he read or heard a lot of Quran and listened to the da'wah of the Prophet? He loves his nephew. And he says, you know what? I'm just going to accept Islam. And so even if the original intention wasn't purely for the sake of Allah, down the road, is it going to become more and more pure? Yeah, that's up to Allah. That's not up to you. Final example of this is you recite the surah all the time. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. When the victory comes, the Kaaba was conquered. The idols were destroyed. All the tribes of Arabia, all of a sudden, all of them started accepting Islam. The question is, hey, where were you guys 2 years ago, man? Where were you guys 5 years ago? All of a sudden, now that Islam is winning, you want to join Islam? And they're like, yeah. Why do you want? Because you won. I mean, if you guys took over the Kaaba, you must have something good, so yeah, I'm going to join Islam. My whole village joined Islam. And the tribe, when the tribe leader would join Islam, the whole tribe would join Islam, yes? But then did the Prophet ﷺ check each one of their intentions? No. Someone accepting Islam, even on the outside, for the Muslim, is enough. That's enough. We don't have to investigate inside their heart and find the pure intention, because nobody can investigate inside anybody else's heart. That would be my answer to that question.
我想今天的这个对方式在这个关于联络就是which are one social consideration Christmas or Taiwan traditions we others as per the tradition.
I don't personally. I live in a predominantly Christian society, and they celebrate Christmas obviously and all of that. I just say enjoy your holidays. Enjoy time with your family. I can't, personally, I can't get myself to say Merry Christmas. I can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is because Allah speaks about this event, the birth of Isa and the shirk that was done with that, in such serious terms, that I cannot, just to be sensitive to somebody else's holiday, just use those words lightly. I can't. So I'll just say enjoy your holidays at the most, or enjoy time with your family. But I'm not going to celebrate the false birth of the Son of God. I can't. Or even endorse the words for it. I can't, and I'm not giving you a fatwa, I'm just telling you where I stand on this whole stuff. And I don't think there's anything rude about that. I don't think there's anything rude about that. Christians are very clear about their faith a lot of times. I remember one minister came to our Masjid and he said, listen, as far as I'm concerned, all of you are going to hell. And according to you, I'm doing shirk, so I'm going to hell. But that's okay, we can work with each other and help the orphans, can't we? And I was like, okay, yes, we can. So they're open about that. They're clear about that. And I don't have to condemn anybody to hell, but I at least have to hold on to what I believe. So, I think as far as cultural holidays are concerned, just generally, congratulating them on their time off or time with family and things like that is okay. But I wouldn't endorse the religious festival's name. I wouldn't.
Next question. How do I distinguish the difficulties I go through are for blessing from Allah or a test that I need to choose a different path?
كل نفس ذائقة الموت ونبلوكم بالشر والخير فتنة وإلينا ترجعون. Surah Al-Anbiya, the one who asked this question, 21:35. Every person shall taste death, and we continue to test you with bad and good as a trial. It's interesting, this ayah uses nablukum, which is the test, and then says fitna at the end also. So nablukum fitnatan. This is called maf'ul mutlaq, and maf'ul ma'nawi actually also. What that means is, good and bad, both of them are very serious kinds of tests. Both of them, always. Always. Every good news is a test, and every bad news is a test. It's never not a test. All of it is. Because لكي لا تأسوا على ما فاتكم ولا تفرحوا بما آتاكم. Quran has given us clear guidelines. You shouldn't become depressed over things you lose, and you shouldn't become overly excited about things you gain. Right? And what comes to you, you get too happy, too excited, you get full of yourself, you get reckless, you get careless, and you do things you never thought you would do. That's also a test. So good and bad are both tests. And that's always the case. Yes.
We are
Yes.
So right after finish and we have for the Salah. So this is my first time in the foreign country. My PhD was scholarship in NCU Taiwan. Since that where Muslims are very less here as compared to other religions, the population of Muslims is almost usual. I have a question. Sahabat al-Quran masyarakat to Muslim place regarding the Islam. So why are they very less Muslim in this country? How is it important? How do we invite Muslim people to Islam? We have a very
So why are there so few Muslims in this country? I don't know the answer to that question. There's a saying in Arabic that people of Makkah know their people best. The answer to that lies with the whole Islam with me. How do we invite others to Islam? I say we start inviting our own children to Islam first a little bit, and strengthen Muslim identity, strengthen Muslim presence, let the presence speak for itself, to the point where people come and say, hey, what do you believe? What are you guys about? And when your identity as a Muslim, your service as a Muslim is so unique that nothing else is like it, it attracts people's curiosity anyway towards you, right? So da'wah is not just giving people a pamphlet or debating with them. Da'wah is also speaking, representing our religion. The challenge you guys have, and I'm aware of this, at some level of your challenge, you're a minority community in a dominant culture, even though this culture, mashallah, is very friendly towards Muslims. They're very accepting of Muslims. But it's also a very powerful, materialistic culture. And materialism is a very powerful force. And our children will get easily sucked into that force. Which means in 2 or 3 generations, there may not be, this place may not be full. I was telling someone, when Muslims live in a minority, then it's like every day, 1% of your Islam is being taken away from you. Slow drip, slowly. And every year, a little bit of your Islam is being taken away from you. You understand? And if you want to reinforce Islam, being the way we are in a Muslim country, you can be in Indonesia, your grandfather was a Muslim, your father was a Muslim, you're a Muslim, you grew up hearing the Adhan, Aqiqah, Ramadan, Halal, all of it. Your children easily Muslim, even if they're not conscious Muslim culturally, it's easy to carry on the Islam. When you're in a minority, Islam is being taken away. There's no outside support. In fact, everything on the outside is taking away from Islam. So the only support for Islam is going to have to come from inside the home. You're going to be the best educator of Islam to your children, to yourself. And it's okay that, I told you, the only time you started learning about Islam is when non-Muslims ask you questions. But now you should feel a little bit of good guilt, not bad guilt, good guilt. Man, this is my religion, I should know about it myself. I should learn about it myself. I should know about this book myself. I need to dedicate time to this. The same way, I see people in this culture, they have really good habits, by the way. I go running early in the morning, there's 80-year-old people like doing Tai Chi and jogging and stuff. And it's so cool. And there are group exercise classes in the park. It's amazing. So you know what? One thing you can learn from these people is discipline and commitment and like self-control. They control their diet, they control their exercise, they control their sleeping. They're very disciplined people. Well, you know what? You can use that discipline to learn some Islam. 20 minutes a day, every day without fail. 30 minutes a day, every day without fail. Let it become a system. Let it become part of your routine. Right? And then, inshallah, you'll see the benefits of that, your family will see the benefits of that. And inshallah, this country will see the benefits of that too. Alright, so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of, is there any more questions? Should we stop here? One last one? One last one.
So it's not reincarnation. Why are people born with better life? They start life better, even though they didn't do anything what I know is that you have miserable life right now is because you carry a karma from previous.
Okay, so we don't believe in karma, and we don't believe that any human being is cursed or carrying over the burden from a previous life. We believe that every human being is a unique soul that has been brought to the earth and sent from the heavens to the earth into the womb of the mother. God tests human beings with different kinds of tests. Some people, He gives them an unusual amount of success. Some people, He gives them very difficult health, or very lonely life, or very difficult financial challenges, or whatever else. Every human being's potential, Allah knows, God knows. And knowing their potential, He gives them a very different story in their life that is unlike anybody else's story. The people that come in their life, the money that comes in their life, the health that comes in their life, the trials that come in their life are unique to them. So in our religion, لا تتمنوا ما فضل الله به بعضكم على بعض. Don't wish for what someone has been given more than you. You don't live a life in Islam, we don't live a life of comparison. You know, say this person is better because they must have done something good before. Also, we don't believe that if you do good now, that you will become rich. Because nobody did more good than the Prophet ﷺ, and he was made homeless, right? And he was starving too. And you don't believe that if you do good now, then all your problems will be solved. Actually, we believe that human beings were created in exhaustive labor. Life is difficult. Life is challenging. Even people who look very happy on the outside, you know, on Instagram, they look really happy. But you don't know what's happening on the other side of that camera, and they're absolutely miserable. There could be somebody sitting in an office having suicidal thoughts, and you're riding a bicycle outside, looking at this beautiful office building, you look at that same guy in the window, you're like, man, I wish I had his life. And that guy, who's buried under debt, and he's slaving away at the office, he's looking at you riding the bike, man, I remember the university days, I wish I had that life. You know, so you think somebody has a better life, but they have struggles you don't know about. They have challenges you have no idea about. So this deen, this religion, is a worldview where I have my unique challenges. And I have to rise to the occasion of my unique challenges. I have to make the most of what has been given to me. And none of those things are a punishment. And none of those things are a reward. All of those things are tests. All of them. I am speaking to you here right now. Right? All the way from across the ocean. But why am I here? There's a billion people that produce content. There's a lot of people that know a lot more than I do. They're much smarter than I am. They're much better, you know, they're much better at da'wah than I am, or anything else. Why did Allah make me have the opportunity? It's not because I earned it. It's because He's testing me with these opportunities. And my test is different than your test. This is why I have a problem even with Muslims who say, make dua my son becomes like you. No. I make dua your son stays your son. And he becomes like himself. Because Allah gave him or her, Allah gave them a different life, a different set of challenges, a different set of talent, a different set of opportunities. We have to navigate that to the best of our ability. And it absolutely has nothing to do with paying for something that happened in the past. You are not cursed from before. We're all blessed from the beginning. That's it.
Questions here, and inshallah.
I'm going to take you with me.
So maybe some of these bios or some sharing page or the addresses. Yesterday, I did say to all the audience that it's not the last time serving, so I don't know how to that.
Yeah.
So inshallah. Masjid Taiwan, and as well to the organizer, which is Hadi, Islamic Education Center, and all volunteers that are involved in doing this amazing event. And of course, also all of you participate and spend your weekend to attend this event, inshallah, and Allah give you benefits, and Allah give you understanding and the strength to practice all the knowledge that we have received, inshallah.
One last quick thing, I especially like to thank this young man over here who met me in Kuala Lumpur and said, "Come to Taiwan." And I said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, it's coming out." And I said, "Okay." So, it's because of it. And then the support that was given to him, Brother Aziz, his family, and his team, these people have been unbelievable. Their hospitality, the amount they care is actually overwhelming. So, just Allah protect them, Allah preserve them, and Allah put barakah in the work that they're doing to try to spread the word of Allah and to serve the Ummah here. And those of you that don't know about them, they're wearing these, volunteer. You should reach out to them and see if you can help them also, because they could use help. They should, good efforts should grow. There's a handful of people doing so much. Everything from this collaborate. This didn't happen automatically. Like a lot of time and effort goes into these things, and it's not coming from some huge organization. It's just a handful of volunteers. So it's a really amazing thing that they're doing that. And we should be grateful to them for that. Allah bless them for their efforts, and any good that comes from any of this, will Allah reward them for it for generations to come. The only last request I have of you guys is, when the salah happens, I'm going to run out of here because I got to get to the airport. So I know you're going to say, just one selfie, just one. But the problem is, there's a few hundred of you, just one means I missed my flight. So do a distant selfie, and spiritually I'm with you. I'm not too low because it's still